Welcome to RPG Heroes, a podcast where every other week I speak to a true hero in the realm of role-playing games about their journey, their craft, and their views. As your host, I will focus on one particular aspect of this wonderful hobby for the interview, regale you with stories from my own 25 years of experience with role-playing games, and reflect on the major takeaways from the interview. Join me now on this epic journey and awaken the hero in you. Welcome to episode 18 of the RPG Heroes podcast. Today's episode is all about what a lot of people see as a daunting part of being a game master, which is prepping or preparing your sessions. And to help us with this topic, I have interviewed Mike Shea, better known probably as Slyflourish on the internet. He has written a book called The Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, a title that appealed to me so much I bought the book pretty much blindly and without a single regret. Now, Mike is going to tell us all about how to be a lazy dungeon master, how to save time when you're preparing your game, and how to use that time more effectively. Other than that, in the episode, we're going to have a chat about my ideas for preparing a game and also some really good resources that I found online. Before we get into all that goodness, though, some stuff about the podcast. We are, at the moment of recording, we are 15 downloads shy of 3,000, which is amazing. And, the way the numbers are going at the moment, I suspect that we're not going to hit 3,000 before this episode comes out. So probably one of you early listeners are going to be the one that kind of gets us over 3,000. So thanks in advance for listening. Also, my game that I'm running for Albacon, the online convention, has sold out, much to my surprise. So that's wonderful. Of course, that doesn't mean the whole convention is sold out, quite far from it. So if you're still looking for a cool game to play, make sure you go to albacon.co.uk and find a game that suits you. They have games in all sorts of time zones, and I'm sure you can find something to your liking. And the great thing is the £5 that you'll spend for signing up for a game goes straight to charity. So that, of course, is well worth it. In other news, in the previous episode, we talked a little bit about how to choose the particular system that you want to play with your group. And in that episode, I talk about the fact that my group is currently in that process of choosing a new game. Well, we have made our choice. And I have to say, it was not as clear-cut as I would have liked. So I chose 4 games that I wanted to run for them, and I gave a short description of each and gave some examples of media that they could check out if they wanted to kind of get an idea for the feel of the game, of the genre, etc. And so the games that I chose were Mutant Year Zero, and Blades in the Dark, and The Expanse, and Forbidden Lands. And, in our conversations, we found that there were more than one player who didn't like post-apocalyptic stuff as a genre, so that kind of ruled out Mutant Year Zero. And then some players wanted to do something other than traditional fantasy, because we'd been playing D&D for so long, and they're also playing a Pathfinder campaign with a different game master, so they wanted to do something different. Well, that kind of ruled out Forbidden Lands. Although I have to say, Forbidden Lands, it's a fantasy RPG, but they do a lot of really cool twists on the more traditional ideas of fantasy worlds. Anyway, and then The Expanse, there was one player who said, yeah, look, if we're going to play that, I'd prefer not to, because I really don't like that type of sci-fi. I need fantasy in my stories. So I thought, okay, I guess Blades in the Dark is the only obvious choice left over. But then several players were not so sure about the heist aspect of it and the mix of fantastical and the Victorian/steampunk stuff. So we arrived at a stalemate. And of course, one of the tasks of a game master is that you try and navigate your way through a stalemate by asking questions and getting a feel for the room. So what I did is I asked them, so we played D&D for 3.5 years in my campaign. It's almost over. What did you like and what did you dislike? What should we keep doing in our next game? And what should we definitely do differently in our next one? And the funny thing is, after quite a lot of discussion about those things, we ended up choosing Forbidden Lands. So that's going to be the game we will be playing. Forbidden Lands by Free League Games. Absolutely incredible game. I got the box set at home here, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And one of the things that I like about it as a game master is it gives me lots of random tables. So I can generate villages, I can generate NPCs, I can generate kind of like mini adventures or plot lines. I can generate even demons. So every demon that they would encounter would be unique. And there are just so many really wonderful tables to help you if you get stuck creatively, or just even to help you create something that you wouldn't have created on your own. And I would say a lot of game books that are out there that have a lot of these kind of tables in them are worth their money, even if you're not going to play that particular game, because they will help you in similar games that use the same kind of genre. Now, my epic level supporters on Patreon, they can find me on patreon.com/rpgheroes. They actually get an update every month about the campaign that I run. So they're going to receive maybe one, maybe two more reports about my D&D campaign, then that'll be over. And then I shall be writing reports on my Forbidden Lands campaign. So if you're curious about that, make sure to look me up on patreon.com/rpgheroes and see if you're willing to support me for a few dollars a month. Okay, well, enough about that. Let's dive into our topic. So, preparing for a game session. What I've found, and if I look around me, what I see other people also experiencing, is that preparing for a session is one of the more daunting tasks for a game master. Once you're at the table, you're playing the game, you're hopefully having fun, and hopefully you're noticing your players having fun, and then things kind of just happen, and it won't always be amazing, but at the very least you'll have fun and you'll learn some things, and if you reflect afterwards, you get better and better at it. Plus, it's the playing the game part, so it's what you're doing all this work for. But the actual preparation, well, depending on how busy you are and how maybe sensitive you are to stress and those kind of things, it can be quite a big thing to get to work on. And also it can, if you do it a lot, if you run a lot of games, or if you run a weekly game that is has long sessions, it can also feel like a lot of work. In fact, the word work here I think is key. Sometimes it can feel like work. And I've read advice online saying, well, if it starts to feel like work, maybe take a break, maybe don't do it. I'm not so sure about that particularly. I think, though, that if it starts to feel like work, you need to look at, why am I doing it? Is it worth it for me? And maybe should I look at, how am I doing it? Is it because I'm creating a lot of unnecessary work for myself? Or is it because, well, some other reason? And what I've found over the years is that it helps me immensely with my preparations for a game if I use some sort of system. And I don't mean a computer system, although I'll get into a computer system that I do use for it nowadays. But I mean more of a system as in a fixed way of doing things. Because if you have a system or a template or something like that, well, then it very quickly becomes an exercise in creatively filling the blanks. And suddenly, the act of preparing for the game becomes a very different activity. One that isn't just sitting down thinking, oh God, what are we going to do this time? I hope they will have fun. It'll be more like, well, okay, let's see. What is step one? I need to think, for instance, about what they did last time so that I get into the story again, that I get my mindset correct, that my brain is in the right gear, and I take some notes and I write down things that I think were interesting. Well, so part of my system is that one of the first things I do is I after a session, hopefully if I have the time and energy, I write down some quick notes for a recap. And if I haven't done that the same day or the next day, I'll definitely do it when I start preparing. Writing down a short recap helps me during the game because I like to start with a recap. Whoa, I should really cut that out. Recap. Anyway, a recap. It helps me, but also the players to kind of get into gear, to go move away from the conversations, hey, how's everybody doing, and how's your cat, and blah, 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 to actually starting to get into the game. And what I usually tend to do is I ask the players, what did you think happened last time, and how did your character experience that? Or maybe can you summarize last week's session from your character's point of view? And I've had even gaming groups where we had a small reward for being the one who did the recap. Obviously, an in-game reward, yeah. And it reminds me of the way that TV series work, in that most TV series, they also recap at the start of their episode what important things happened that lead to what's happening in the episode you're about to watch. And as a creative person, as a creator of, D&D content, I guess, at the moment at least it's D&D, it helps me to get in the mindset of, okay, these important things happened. This is what the characters did. These are at the very least going to be the consequences of those actions. And I should do something with that in the next session, or at the very least in a few sessions later. So that the world that they play in feels real. So the actions that they take feel like they have some kind of meaning. And it also helps me because the input of the players is really one of the most important factors in a good game. The next step in my process is then that I look at the bigger picture. So I have this big campaign with an overarching storyline, etc., and a big bad who does stuff and who wants stuff. I've discussed it before on previous episodes. And what I do is I just zoom out for a second and think, okay, so we're headed in roughly this direction. This is what the players wanted to do with the plot lines, etc., that they've figured out so far. So where do I think they're heading? Sometimes also I will ask them at the end of a session, hey, where do you guys think you'll be heading next time, so that I can prepare properly? Often they work with me to let me know, which is very handy. And even if they do choose to go somewhere else, that's fine, obviously. But it does help to know what the general direction of the campaign is and to kind of put that in your mind as you write the next session. Then once I have an idea of what might happen during the next session, then I start thinking about more detail level stuff, such as how can I make this cool? How can I make it interesting? How can I make this location unique, or this NPC a bit different from the other ones? Once I have a bit of an idea of the theme and the kind of atmosphere of the session, then I start looking at, okay, if we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, what monsters potentially could I use that fit both the theme and the level of the party? And that helps me as well, because sometimes, what I'll do is I'll just look up the D&D. I run D&D 3.5, but I think 5th edition, I'm sure, has something similar. It's full of tables that say this is the level of certain monsters, and these are the environments in which you can encounter them. And of course, you're free to change that, but sometimes I just let myself be led by those tables. So, for instance, one of the games that I was preparing for my D&D group involved a huge subterranean kind of abandoned city, and all kinds of nasty things had happened there. And, it wasn't super important what exactly happened, but it had to follow a certain theme. So I used the Eberron book, a bit of history about the place, and I also used the encounter tables. And I found that at their level, in a subterranean place, mind flayers would be a pretty good choice. And I thought, okay, mind flayers. And just thinking about mind flayers and about why they would be in that particular place and what they would be trying to achieve over there, and also who do they have as their allies, it helped me shape a huge part of that session, and led into all kinds of interesting things, including them encountering an elder brain of all things. So, in short, what I try to do is I try to let myself be inspired by what happened last time, what I think is their current place in the overall story, the type of location that they are heading towards or that they are in still, and fitting kind of encounters for their level and that area. And once I get those things all together and I get all this inspiration going, then usually quite a lot of stuff kind of flows out of my pen. And then once that starts happening, I can start thinking about, okay, if that's the case and they are here and there are mind flayers and this and this and this is gonna happen or likely to happen, then what should I put in there as interesting challenges for each character? Because I think it's important to think about what are particular characters good at, what kind of cool equipment do they have, or cool spells or abilities that they should be able to showcase and use. And not that I'm trying to prepare a session to such an extent that only one particular skill can solve one particular obstacle. Far from it, but I do try to include opportunities for characters to use all kinds of different abilities and skills that they have. And aside from skills, etc., I also try, whenever possible, to involve a little bit of the background of at least one of the player characters and possibly more of them. And then it's kind of up to the mood I'm in or the type of game that I'm running. If it's a type of game that's going to have a lot of combat and a lot of tactical stuff, then I'll probably start switching over to maps, drawing them, because that can also give me more inspiration for funny things that might happen. Or I go more in the direction of mechanics, etc. So starting to stat out certain things, starting to stat out the traps and the monsters and the environments, etc. And I think one of the big questions that a lot of game masters have, especially ones that are just starting out or getting back into the hobby, or even just ones that have done it a long time but feel like they're taking way too much time for their prep, then the question is, how do I get all of this information onto paper or onto my screen in a way that doesn't take too much time, but also that is usable in the session? And I have to say, in this regard, I learned a lot from Runehammer. That was actually our guest on episode 1. And I have to say, this gentleman, he's a real inspiration when it comes to a lot of things. But one of the things that I really loved about his approach to preparing games is that he said, well, I have a journal. It's got relatively small pages, and I want stuff to fit on 1 or 2 pages so that I don't have to flip through a book all the time. I should, in preparing, be able to make such concise notes that the rest of it is kind of in my head, or the rest of it can kind of be conjured up during the session based on what the players do. So he said, I rattle out a lot of bullet points. Well, that's already a great start, is how to organize what you're writing. And bullet points are, in game at least, a lot better than big blocks of text. That's for absolutely sure. And the other thing is, what I really liked about Runehammer's approach is that he said, well, there are, in an encounter, there should be something that is a threat. So some kind of danger. It could be anything. Could be a physical threat. Could also be maybe a social threat, such as if you don't convince the count of your innocence, you'll be thrown in jail or something like that. So a threat should be there because that makes things interesting, makes it tense, and it makes you have to fight for something. And then there should be some sort of timer. So Runehammer believes a lot in timers. And because time limits on things or things happening at a certain time, that is a great source of drama and tension. Because if people are allowed to just kind of take as long as they like to do things or to look at stuff or to walk around, well, then you very quickly get into this kind of muddy area of what are we actually doing here? Are we still playing a game or are we just talking? And then the third thing, which is one that I never came up with myself, but I really, really like, is the third T, which is a treat. And his idea behind that, and you should watch his videos because he explains it a lot better than I can right now. But the idea of a treat is that every encounter in a session should have one thing at least that can help the players if they are creative and if they notice it. And that gives a lot of value to a lot of the perception checks or do I notice stuff checks, depending on whatever game you're playing, that people tend to do when they enter a new space. You know, people want to check everything out and they want to find things that can work to their advantage. But if you haven't thought of really cool things that could work to the player's advantage, then a lot of those checks go kind of unused. You know, they roll a natural 20 and they add their enormous bonus and they said, this is my one specialty, this is what I'm good at. What do I find? Well, nothing really. That's a big downer. So the 3 T's, as he calls them, I found those very useful. So what I did for quite a while was to write down before I started my prep, okay, I have 3 T's, and what shall I make of them? So that I wouldn't forget to include those in my encounters. And then in a separate video, the very same creator, who has just the most amazing ideas, he talks about the 3 Ds, which are duration and damage and disruption. So each encounter, he says, you can kind of dial up or down duration, as in how much time do you have to do stuff? Is there a very limited time, or do you have a lot of time? Then the damage output of whatever is in there, is it very high or very low, or medium, of course? And the disruption, in other words, and that's more usually related to the environment. How much are the players hampered in their movement, in their ability to use all their skills and all their equipment? And by turning those dials, and especially if you look at your whole session, let's say you have 5 encounters in a session, if you change the dials throughout your session, you'll get a very varied feel, and that can really help you once again in your preparation in thinking about what makes a cool and fun session. Well, one thing is variety. It's the spice of life, after all. So I'll put links to his videos about these topics in the show notes, and I really recommend to watch them. They're wonderful. And one of my Patreon supporters, Thomas, was very kind to share with us in the Discord group a PDF, or I think it's a Word document. Well, anyway, a document that you guys can use if you click on the link in the show notes, that includes the 3 Ts and the 3 Ds. It's like a game prep template, as it were. So thanks for that, Thomas. And, well, it is a way, and I think a really good way, to keep your notes, your preparation notes, short. And quite a lot of really successful game masters are known for doing that, for keeping their preparation notes short. Now, what I used to do was have pages and pages and pages of background information and lots of maps and detailed, completely statted out NPCs and monsters and traps and treasure, etc., etc. And that's great. It's really helped me in the beginning. But what made it difficult to use sometimes was in-game trying to find the right information. And I really begin to subscribe now to the idea of having 1 page of prep and that's it, or one easily viewable piece, as a collection of information. And apparently Chris Perkins is well known for also really believing in the 1 A4 page and that's it. You shouldn't have more for your session. I'll put links in the show notes to several videos that I also really appreciate when it comes to game prep. I don't really have the time to mention all of them, but I have to say a lot of them are really super good. So I mentioned a video about Chris Perkins, not by him, but it's about him, about how he prepares. I'll definitely link to that. WASD20, also a previous guest of the show, has good videos about preparing your game, how to be a great game master. Guy, again, a previous guest, he did some good stuff about this online. And of course, Matt Colville, who has not been on the show yet. I've been trying to get a hold of him, but he's a busy guy. So let's see if that ever happens. Okay, so basically, if you have some sort of system, and I think what system it is to prepare your game is not even the most important part. It is more about that you have a system that will really save you some time and also help you with the confidence that you've done everything that you need to do to have a good game. And I think if you want to figure out your own system, which I think is always going to be better than just doing what somebody else does and copy paste, it has to suit you and your game and your group, is to look at each game that you've run and look back and think, okay, what did I prepare? What actually happened? What part of my preparation really helped me during the game, and what part never really came up? And then you can kind of pare it down that way. And as I mentioned before, then there is the actual system of where are you going to put your notes. Now, a lot of people believe in notebooks, and I have to say I subscribe to that idea. I really like the idea of having a physical notebook that you can write and draw in and kind of scratch things out, and maybe even cut out and paste little things that you printed out. And it just feels cool also to have this cool looking notebook. I mean, it's also, I think, as a game master, it's a way to kind of reward yourself and give you that special feeling like, yeah, what you're doing is special. It shouldn't be written on like toilet paper. You should put it in a cool notebook with a faux leather cover, maybe with some skulls on it or whatever you prefer. And that can help you to have that little tome of secrets and give you that kind of feeling, if that's the thing you like. I have to say, though, I did that a lot, but then if I'm in a lost moment, let's say waiting at an airport or a train station, or I'm between things at work, and I have some good ideas and I want to jot them down, and then if I don't have my notebook, well, then where am I going to put it? And then if I put it somewhere else, do I still want to copy it into my notebook? And I noticed, especially as my games had to migrate to online because of the COVID crisis, I thought, well, maybe it's handier to have stuff on my computer. So I started to use notes or sticky notes. Yeah, sticky notes by Microsoft, because it was native to my operating system. I thought, well, why not? And it's kind of handy. You have these separate little notes per session, and you can kind of look back at them. And so I liked it, and it didn't look too distracting on the rest of my desktop, and it doesn't cost anything. But then the problem is, now I have this idea, but I don't have my laptop, and I don't have these sticky notes on my phone. So what do I do now? Until the guest that you're about to listen to, Slyflourish, posted something on Twitter about Notion.so, and I've really fallen in love with that particular platform right now for my game prep notes, because it allows me to create toggles and bullets and all these kind of things. You can put pictures in, make all these pages. Plus, I can use it. There is an app for my phone. I can use it on my work laptop because it's browser based. I can use it at home, and I'm never without my notes, and I'm never without an opportunity to put some idea that kind of pops up in my head as I'm walking or something, quickly jot down some lines about it. And because of the way it's structured, with all these toggles and bullets, and well, it has millions of options. It also helps me to structure my thoughts, and I use the toggle option a lot because during the game, then I can have every toggle collapsed except for the one that I'm currently in, or that we're currently working on in the game, and that keeps my screen clutter free, which I really like. I don't have to scroll endlessly to find what I'm looking for. No, I'm currently in this and this encounter. We're talking to this NPC. That's the toggle I've clicked open. And wow, that's a real game changer for me. Anyway, I notice I've been talking for way too long. So let's now hear about this topic from our specialist, Mike Shea. Welcome to the show, Mike Shea, also known as Slyflourish on the internet. Mike has been sharing his Dungeon Master secrets with the world since 2009, very actively adding more and more articles, books, videos, and daily D&D tips. His book, The Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, has been a game changer for me, literally and figuratively. It's not surprising this book won a Gold Emmy last year. His content is always top-notch, and I like how he's not afraid to share ideas that are still works in progress. His experiments with Notion.se have really helped me to find my favorite online tool for organizing my DM notes to date. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Excellent. So one thing that I read on your website about yourself and also on Slyflourish is that you really love Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yeah.
So is that the only role-playing game you love, or are there more?
Oh, yeah. I love lots of role-playing games.
Okay.
Yeah, I think some of the ones that, and like, it's funny. While I was waiting for the podcast, I just grabbed my copy of Old School Essentials, which I just got yesterday. Yeah. And I was reading that, and I'm like, man, that's kind of Dungeons and Dragons. So that's sort of cheating, but it's Dungeons and Dragons from 38 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
But I just got Morkborg, for example. I don't think I'm pronouncing it right. Merkborg, I think it's pronounced.
I have no clue.
So yeah, it won a 4-time Gold Emmy winner RPG this year. And yeah, it's an entire setting and adventure and character creation and monsters and RPG in an 80-page, crazy, insane, dark metal, death metal, not probably black metal style RPG. And I just love the creativity that's in there, and made a character yesterday just for fun.
Oh yeah.
And I was also I'm a big fan of 13th Age. I love Numenera. I don't play Numenera. I always like to joke that in some alternate universe, I'm playing Numenera full time. I love that game a lot, which is like the polar opposite of something like Merkborg or Shadow of the Demon Lord, Robert Schwab's RPG, which I also love. And so I think I love fantasy games more than other kinds of games. Science fiction games are great too. I'd love to play more Starfinder and stuff like that. I played a couple sessions of Starfinder and could totally get into that. Yeah. But I think fantasy and science fiction are really the genres that I like.
Yeah.
And I'll play just about anything. I played Zweihander just recently.
Ah, yeah.
And Yeah. So I'll play a lot of different, but I'm not big into contemporary RPGs. I kind of want to leave the real world, even if it's vampires.
Yeah.
I'd kind of happy to leave behind any, any sort of connection to the real world, and instead, dive deep into high fantasy and high, science fantasy and science fiction.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, it's interesting. I did just this week. I had a whole conversation with my I call it my D&D group, but we're still playing D&D, but we're going to switch systems soon.
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying the exact same thing. They said, any game is cool, but we want to have something fantastical, whether it's sci-fi or fantasy. It shouldn't be the real world. I was like, okay, fair enough.
That's kind of.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like, especially with 5th edition, like I played a lot of 4th edition, I played a fair bit of 3rd edition, and a lot of 2nd edition when I was a kid. And 5th edition really hit like a really great balance of character customization, character growth, and ease of play, and kind of the familiarity. So it hit a lot of just the right pegs that a lot of times it's like, we could play other RPGs and we'd like to play other RPGs, but we're having so much fun with 5th.
Yeah.
Let's stick to 5th. And nobody, I've had the same gaming group now. People in my gaming group have been doing it for 11 or 12 years.
Yeah.
And nobody's really said, like, I'd really like to try something else. Like, we have tried other things.
Yeah.
We did a 11 session Shadow of the Demon Lord session earlier this year. And it was great, but like nobody was upset about going back to 5th. So
no. Okay.
What my friends and I enjoy.
Yeah, it's kind of like the home base, huh?
It is, yeah. It's just it's very comfortable,
Yeah.
It's comfortable and it's easy, and I know how to do it, and
yeah,
and it doesn't have anything that precludes me doing it. Like, there's no hard rule problem or something like, oh God, I just hate when this happens. There's nothing like that.
Okay, yeah, excellent. Yeah, and I think that's very common, especially if you're going to be the person that tends to run the game.
Mm-hmm.
That familiarity and that kind of feeling like you're coming home.
Yeah,
that really helps to get rid of a lot of the kind of what makes sometimes prepping a game feel like work.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, like I know the monster manual backward and forward, right? So it's really easy for me to. I mean, there's a lot of monster stats I know in my head, so it's like, an ogre, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to look up an ogre, and
that's handy. Yeah.
So So I think Numenera and the Cypher system, for example, that'd be a little bit controversial. I could say, for me, my opinion is, I think I like that style of DMing better. I like the, for me, actually rolling fewer dice on the DM side is just fine. Like, I don't need to roll a lot of dice as a DM. And Cypher, you generally don't roll dice on the DM side. And Cypher system's ability to create just about any challenge that you want to throw at your players by coming up with a number between 1 and 10 and then building all the stats off of that number, it makes it even really crazy flexible for like reskinning things and building ad hoc monsters and building ad hoc challenges. And that's not something you can easily do in D&D. You kind of have to reskin. So there's some areas that I think Cypher is a better system. There are some things with Cypher I think are not great on the player side, which kind of draws away. Some of my wife isn't a huge fan of Cypher, which means I don't play a lot of Cypher. So there are some aspects to it that are a little, they kind of hit risk aversion on the player side. That means I don't play it as often. But D&D is not so hard that I can't, I find it enjoyable, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm running 3 games a week.
Oh, wow.
I love it. So,
oh my God.
Yeah.
I run about a game a month.
Yeah. A lot of people, right. A lot of people play like longer. I play short games, and I play, on the average about 3 a week, 2 to 3 a week, depending on the week.
Excellent. Yeah. I'm just about to wrap up a 3.5-year campaign.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you count the amount of games, well, if it's 12 a year, then, that's going to be roughly the number.
Sure. Are they long games?
Yeah, well, it depends. It used to be, but now with COVID-19, we're playing online, and we tend to make the sessions a bit shorter.
Gotcha.
It used to be whole days,
Yeah, right. Yeah, I remember playing monthly games that I used to play in, and they were all day affairs. Like, you would get up, grab breakfast, buy a pack lunch or order lunch there, go to the guy's house and hang out in his basement all day. You know, and then about 7 or 8 o'clock you go home.
Yeah, exactly.
10 hours.
Yeah. Completely on a sugar rush and
yeah, right. Constant oscillating sugar rush, right? Like, I'm gonna need another ding dong over here. I'm starting to fade.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that kind of brings us neatly to running the actual game. So one of the way that I discovered you, which sounds kind of weird when I say it, but was when I was looking for a way to reduce the time that it takes to prepare my game, because I found my life was changing. I became a father about a year and a half ago, and that tends to eat up your time, plus a full-time job and all these things. And I figured I still want to run games because I love it, and I still want to produce a quality game, but I don't have enough time. And then while Googling, I came up with this. Well, I mean, listeners can't see it, but so I found The Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, and that title really spoke to me.
Yeah. I got lucky with that title.
Yeah. How did you come up with it?
I don't know. I don't remember. Like I said, I really wish I had a better origin story for like the day when I was, a tree branch hit me in the head.
Yeah.
And I had this wonderful epiphany while they're taking me to the hospital about, I need to help people. But it kind of led into it. I think it was a slower burn. That, I knew I wanted to focus on helping DMs run games. Right. Yeah. And I wanted to kind of dive into that. And I wrote a couple of books before I wrote the original Lazy Dungeon Master, which was 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And it kind of led into this idea. I think it was kind of at the tail end of 4th edition of D&D, which was a heavy prep. I would say that was a very heavy prep game system. There's a million words, billions of words probably spoken about 4th edition that people can dive into. But one of the things I would argue as a DM that I ran it a lot, right? I ran 4 or 5 campaigns. I ran 1 to 30, campaigns. I went 1 to 30. I ran a 4-year campaign in it. I think 4-year campaign, 2-year, at least 2 or 3-year campaign.
Oh,
that went the whole distance. And and it was heavy prep, and particularly it was heavy prep on the encounter side, that you really needed to think about your encounters. You usually wanted to have 7 or 8 variables in your encounter that you would tweak. It expected that you were playing on a grid.
Yeah.
So you had to build maps, and that's when I got like into tabletop terrain and built nice Dwarven Forge setups. And luckily miniatures were cheap. Plastic was cheap back then. Oil was cheap, and therefore plastic was cheap, and labor was cheap. Yeah. And that meant miniatures were cheap. So I could get like a lot of miniatures for 25 cents a piece. And now they're like $2 a piece. They went up significantly, but I bought a lot back then. So I have a lot of minis.
Yeah.
And used them for my 4th edition games. And there were, you'd see stuff like Mike Krahulik from Penny Arcade got into it, and he was really creative with how he approached his 4th edition games, and that kind of stirred up my own creativity thinking about how to do it. But it was heavy prep, and at the tail end was just when the D&D Next playtest was starting.
Yeah.
And I started running that, and I realized like how much effort was going into kind of pre-staging games about where they were going to go.
Yeah.
And I think I wrote a book called Slyflourish's Dungeon Master Tips, which is now on my website for free. The text is all available for free and under Creative Commons if people want to run with it.
Yeah.
And that kind of led into this idea that like, the more prep we're doing doesn't necessarily always make the game better.
Yeah.
There are ways that we can shorten the prep that we're doing that have little effect, that don't diminish our game. Yeah. And then it kind of stirred around to like, is it actually true that the less prep we do, the better the game can be in some cases, or maybe in all cases? I don't know. And so that was kind of a premise of the book, and a lot of experienced DMs kind of resonated with that and said, that, I heard that more than once. This isn't just like Mike Shea had a bright idea.
Yeah.
This is stuff I had heard from other people. I was like, let's explore this idea. And then it was like, well, what's the minimum you need, right?
Yeah.
Like no prep is probably not practical for most people.
No.
Being able to walk into a 4-hour game with nothing and then make one. There are people who do it.
Oh yeah.
But it's not common. And I don't think people would be I'm certainly wouldn't be comfortable doing that. So it's like, well, what is the minimum amount? And I don't think that either the original Lazy Dungeon Master or Return, which have 2 different systems really, like they don't treat it the same way. They're not the way of doing it.
No.
But they are one approach, and it seems to be an approach that has worked for people. And it's certainly an approach that has been modular enough that people have taken the pieces they like and been able to sort of build their own process around it. So I think there's a big piece of this is that DMs just needed some help, right? Like they needed some permission to have a system.
exactly. Because
And
there's
if
no
you have
DM
a system,
school.
you're better off than if you don't. So
Yeah.
you can work out in that regard.
But that's it. So there's no DM school. There's no
Right.
college education you can get for being some kind of pro level DM.
Yeah.
So you need to find resources, and like you say, sometimes you need kind of permission to not spend hours and hours and hours of all kinds of minute, detailed preparations. Yeah. So out of you've written several books on the topic. Like, what would you say is your number one tip without completely making a purchase of the book useless? But
no, I don't mind. I think most of the content of the book you can get in other places too. Like I've written blog articles for a long time, and they're all kind of there. I think the book is the best encapsulation of it, and it's well edited and has pretty pictures and
it does,
checklists and everything
it's
else.
lovely.
So I still, I'm a big fan, and it's pretty cheap. Like you can get it on PDF as $8.
Yeah.
What's the best tip? God, that's I should have thought that one through. And I know I have a good answer that isn't like the stereotypical answer of like have fun and relax, right? Relax with your friends. It's not that right. It's not that background. I'll go with secrets. I'll go with secrets and clues. So I think that and it's it's actually the chapter that caused me to write the book was this chapter, because it was something that I had started using a whole lot in my own games, found really, really useful.
Yeah.
Shared it with other people. They found it really useful, and isn't part of the original Lazy Dungeon Master book. And I said, I'm going to have to go back and do this. I need to either edit the original book and add this in or something else. And in fact, there was a blog article on my site called the Lost Chapter of the Lazy Dungeon Master about this. But the idea behind secrets and clues is that as part of your game prep, you write down 10 things that your characters can discover in the next session.
Yeah.
And you don't describe how they're going to find them.
No.
And you don't make them long. They're not paragraphs. They're a sentence. And they can be a wide range of different things. They can be bits of lore and history. They can be bits of character background. Like, hey, it turns out your brother's actually the bad guy.
Yeah.
They can be very specific, like hooks. Like this is where your story hooks and adventure hooks might go.
Yeah.
They can be all kinds of different things. But they're short, and they don't. You don't apply context to them.
Yeah.
And the advantage of that is you have, to me, there's been a lot of talk about like the exploration pillar of 5th edition. And to me, this is key to the exploration pillar, that like exploration is about discovery, right? It's about finding and learning things.
Yeah.
And you don't know how they're going to learn it. And when you're running the game, you kind of don't know what clues they're going to find or how they're going to try to find those clues. Yeah. So you keep this list handy, and 10 is usually more than you need.
Yeah.
But it's also enough to get your brain really thinking deep about what is going to happen. Like if you did 3, it'd be too easy. Even 7 is too easy, I found. But 10, those last 3 are really good ones. Right?
Yeah.
Really had to dive deep into your mind.
Yeah.
And so you might only ever, in my own experiences, I generally bring up about 5 in the game.
Yeah.
But I don't know which 5, and I don't know how they're going to find them. And then I usually, and this is, people are kind of amazed by this, I'll throw them out at the end, regardless of whether they were discovered or not, and then come up with 10 new ones for the next session.
Oh, really? I was going to say, what do you do with the ones?
I don't save them. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I kind of save them because like they're in my old Notion notebooks, but I don't have a database of them. I don't have an Excel spreadsheet.
No.
And I think sometimes DMs could be hoarders who try to like hang on to every bit of lore forever.
Yeah.
And the reality is like, until the players see it, it's not real.
Yeah.
Right. And until it's on the table, metaphorically, sometimes physically, it's not real. So I think that, the one tip, which isn't like the standard sort of stuff you'd hear from everybody else, I would say in whatever prep you're doing, sit and write a list of 10 things your characters can discover in the next session.
Yeah.
And I think it pays a lot of dividends in a lot of different ways. It's a pretty low impact activity that has a high value to it.
Yeah. And I find that it's very true also in the games that I run, that whenever there's something to discover and they discover it, and I tend to, if it's really important, I try not to hide it behind some kind of very high DC dice roll.
Oh, sure.
Then you know, you have this great idea and they roll poorly, and then your idea
Yeah, then
is
it's gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a neat thing about a secret is that you can do that. So you can have them go into a cave and there's like a crazy ancient mosaic on the wall, and they're like, oh, and I'm like, roll a history check, and they were 4, and you're like, okay, you can't really make it out, and it's okay because like the secret could be found somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
like they don't, because they didn't get it on the mosaic. They don't. It's not like they lost their chance to ever get that clue. The clues are independent of that.
Yeah.
So there is this option of, you know, but yeah, other times it's like, no, I have this secret, and I really want them to know. The first chance that they have, I'll be like, you look at that, and it reminds you of this thing you saw.
Yeah. But I love to see the excitement in my players whenever they also have the feeling like, ooh, okay, I think this could be important, you know?
Right. Yeah.
This, and even sometimes it's not, but then it becomes important.
But then it might become important. That's exactly right. That's that idea of like, you know, the world, all of your creation, all of your prep is ethereal. Until the eyes of the characters see it, and then it's real, and now it's important, right?
Yeah, exactly. It becomes important.
An NPC could be nobody until they're introduced, and then they're introduced. They're somebody, and now you got to pay attention to.
And then they start stalking that person. You're like, come on, he's just a peasant.
Yeah, right. Everybody's got stories about that, right? The bartender who suddenly became like a major quest NPC.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes it goes the other way around. You know, there's an important NPC. I remember once with a different group that the players had captured this very important NPC, and they tied him to the wheel of their chariot or whatever it was, and they interrogated him quite roughly, and then they had a conversation about what to do, and they're like, all right, let's go. So they took off in their chariot. Here's awful
with the guy
noises.
tied to the wheel.
Yeah.
Oh no.
They forgot he existed. No, he was still there.
I think I was listening to, I think was it Monty Cook? I think it was Monty Cook talking about games that he was playing with like Bruce Cordell and his friends, and he said that they were playing a Call of Cthulhu game.
Yeah.
And they met a cab driver, like, you know, who was just taking him somewhere, and they liked the cab driver. They're like, why don't you come and hang out with us? And it's like, that's like the worst thing you could do to a cab driver, to call a Cthulhu game. Like, hey, we're all heading to Rylea. Why don't you tag along? Cab driver's, all I did was have an interesting mannerism, and now I have to go to Rylea. Yeah.
Yeah, because in that game, you know.
Right. It's not a good thing to be an important NPC.
No.
Might not end well for you.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So definitely I agree with you that's a wonderful way to also sometimes to get get your imagination going, because if you think of 10 secrets,
it's a right. There's so many reasons I love it, but you know, and it's like you can do it anywhere, right? You can be in a boring meeting, or you could be out in the park or wherever, and you can probably either pull out your phone or pull out a notebook or whatever, and start writing down 10 secrets. I don't know how many secrets I'd had in boring meetings, but it's a lot. And and it's a good mental exercise. It does make you think about your world and your game a lot. So you're starting to kind of wire things in your head, you know, to kind of make things real. There's just so many benefits to it that I've found.
Yeah. And do you do a lot of do you put a lot of effort into tying these secrets into the story when you make the list, or do you wait until they find it? And then
I wait until they find it. Yeah. I don't. I mean, I do try to scope them on the idea of like, is this something they can figure out in the next game?
Yeah.
Right. So there's a few little boundaries that I put in place. I don't want to put secrets in that are way far off that there's no chance they're going to figure this out.
Yeah.
So it's definitely about the here and now. But it can tie to the future. So it can be something, you know, foreshadowing is great. Right. And this is the ability to kind of foreshadow something, like, I don't know how they're going to know this, you know. In my Eberron game, the daughters of Sorakel, who are these like really powerful hags that lead this major monstrous faction.
Yeah.
They acquired a power source of tremendous power, like the equivalent of a really bad nuclear energy source, right?
Yeah.
And I know that one day my players are going to learn about that, you know, but it's kind of not something that they can deal with right now. It's far away in the future.
Yeah.
But they could learn it, right? And they could interrogate a Knoll, and the Knoll could tell them about it, right? And so anything could happen for them to learn it, even though it's a far off seed, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like that. Those are I'm a big believer in spending our attention on the next game. Yeah. More so than on the bigger campaign or the world.
Yeah.
Because one of those is actually going to happen right away, and one of them may not. So
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I found that I got stuck in my game prep for Starfinder at some point, because I was running a game of that, and yeah, one of the things I got stuck on was what's the long what's my long term goal, or where is this actually going? And I couldn't really come up with anything,
Mhm.
and that can really ruin your inspiration. So then I sit there thinking, what am I going to do this session? And I just nothing,
Yeah.
absolutely nothing. Yeah, so it
Yeah,
kind
it
of
can be. Yeah, it's tough. And I'm one kind of caveat to all the nonsense that I put out is I tend to play published adventures more often than making my own.
yeah.
But most recently I've been running an Eberron campaign that is my own, my own adventure. And it's
Mhm.
funny because like my wife and I were out for a walk today, and she's like, "How long do you think it'll go?" And I'm like, "I have no idea." I'm like, "How
Yeah.
long do you want it to go?" She's like, "I don't know." I'm like, "Well, neither of us have any idea." And like, could be the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Probably no longer than the rest of the year. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm like, what level do you want to be when, where do you want your character to go? 10th, 12th, 14th?
Yeah.
We can figure that out.
Yeah.
And so that's weird, and
Yeah.
which is different than like Descent into Avernus, where I'm like, well, no, I pretty well know where you guys are headed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's very
But
different.
I do like having like a North Star, and
Yeah.
Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master talks about that too, that late
Mhm.
idea of like lazy campaign building. And it's like, well, you should know where it's going. So even in my Eberron game, I know where it's headed. Like I
Yeah.
know what the big kind of major issue is. And so do the players, right? They know that it's sort of the big thing, right? That somebody, multiple groups are trying to build the weapon that caused the morning, right?
Yeah.
The big event in Eberron that
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I
destroyed
know
an
about
entire
it.
continent. So
Yeah.
someone is trying to do it again.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
we want to stop them from doing it, right? And so I
Yeah.
don't know who. Like I know one guy that definitely was. So do the players, but I think they might
Yeah.
have stopped him.
Uh-huh.
They're two campaigns, two groups, same campaign, and
Yeah.
in one case I think they stopped them,
Hmm.
but then he went and joined the Daughters of Sorokal, and they are so
Yeah.
so I still have that North Star. Like somebody's trying to build a weapon in the morning. The purpose of the characters is to stop them from doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then so many different things can happen on the way.
Yeah.
I don't even know all the paths that they could, but I know what that star is, and I know where it's going to happen. I know where the conclusion is going to be.
Ah. Yeah.
I have a few general ideas of things that I want to have happen at some point.
Yeah.
But then how they go about it is really,
Yeah.
it's really going to change from session to session.
Yeah.
Which is great. It means I don't know what's going to happen, and that's fun.
Exactly. Yeah. So you get to have a bit of fun too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And so for people who are thinking about getting into running a game rather than playing, or maybe getting back into it after a long time, so probably if they're listening to this, they're like, yeah, okay, but this sounds like the stuff people do who have run games for a long time or who have a lot of experience, and it's all very difficult. And of course, we can very easily say, no, it's not that difficult. But
Yes, it is. I don't.
Yeah,
I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't. I mean, obviously, lots of people like doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not easy. Yeah.
No, definitely not. And there's a lot that running a game asks of you, I think. And prepping is one thing. Of course, at the table, a lot of other things happen. And generally, I find that the game master is also the person responsible for getting, the next session planned. And,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
And usually end it the most, which I think is why
Yeah.
I did it. I did a poll on this. I asked, I think I did a poll on Twitter. I like to do Twitter polls to sort of gauge, it's not great science, but hey, 1,100 views is better than one.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
so I kind of asked people like how they got started as a dungeon master, and I think that the large majority of them got started because no one else would do it. Like that was their, that was the number one reason. Was that no one else would do it, and for other people, it's like I want to arbitrate a story, and or I'm into it more than everyone else. There were lots of reasons why people became a DM, but I think most did it because they were on the spot. And that's how I was, but I was 14 and what I know.
Yeah. Oh wow. So you got some books with your friends, and then like who's gonna run?
Yeah, I was just into it, right? I played the computer games, and I love the computer games, and I was like, I kind of there's more here that I'd like to explore, and I bought the player's handbook, and I'm like, this is cool, and then I recruited some friends and played a I don't know if we played maybe a year, about a year campaign, and then same thing in college. Like I met a guy. I was reading Sword of Shannara outside of the cafeteria, and he came over. This is something that won't happen if you're reading on a Kindle. And he saw the cover and was like, "Oh, Sword of Shannara." And he's like, "You happen to play D&D?" And it's like, "Yeah, I do. I haven't played since high school, but yeah, I played." And he says, "Well, I've got a D&D game, and we'd love to have you play." I was like, "Great,
Excellent.
I said, yeah, meet us this time. And then he called me later and said, hey, do you want to DM? And I'm like, sure. And so they hadn't even met me yet.
Oh, wow.
And the guy, whoever was DMing, they were ready to hand it off.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I picked up the DM mantle and ran a campaign there for about a year.
Excellent. Yeah, you're right about
there.
saying that, because I got a Kindle a few months ago, and I realized, nobody can see what you're reading. And normally I don't really care, but...
Right. It starts conversations.
Yeah.
I've had at least twice where I've met players or friends of mine who play D&D through the fact that, either I or they were reading a book. Like I went to a coffee shop right here in my hometown, my hometown here. And a guy was reading 13th Age.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, hey, I said, sorry, I just noticed you're reading 13th Age.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah. And we talked about trying to play D&D, came to the game, played for 3 or 4 years. He moved and we still keep in touch, and he's playing D&D with his family. And
excellent.
So all because he was reading a D&D book in public place. So
yeah,
I do recommend that. Bring your D&D books with you and read them in public.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to get most of my D&D contacts through how I looked, because nobody can see me on this podcast, but my hair is nice and short now. But I used to have very long hair. Yeah. And if you look like a metal guy, for some reason, people tend to think he might play.
I bet he plays D&D.
Yeah. So I remember the first guy who introduced me to second edition. That was. Yeah. We were in the same school, and we were doing sports, and both of us were hating it. And he's like, hey, have you ever read Lord of the Rings? It's like this kind of secret phrase.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have.
Next week.
Do you ever want to be in Lord of the Rings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Beats the hell out of high school.
Yeah. Well, definitely beats the hell out of running.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I was very lucky in that, I think. And then later, when I, as an adult, when I moved to Belfast, when I was there, I started off as an exchange student. So I was in the library, and the librarian, he saw me, and I was asking a question, I think, about how to get on the internet or something. And he's like, hey, by the way, do you play D&D? I'm like, yeah, how do you know? He's like, yeah, you're the only guy in this whole building with long hair. Like, oh, okay.
The odds are 1 in 5. Yeah. 1 in 2.
And thanks to that, I met many great friends, I have to say.
Yeah. Serendipitous.
Definitely. Yeah. But luckily enough, in both those cases, they didn't turn around and say, by the way, do you also want to run the game for us? That came later.
Yeah.
So I have a friend, for instance, who said that, she's been playing role-playing games for a while now, also LARPing, that kind of stuff. And she said, yeah, I'm thinking about getting into being a game master, but I said, but what? And it's mostly I think a confidence thing, right? Mm-hmm. You have to kind of know, or at least it has to seem like you know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give that person?
Probably above all, and again, this sounds more platitudes, but like keeping it simple. I think that I've seen it a lot, and I haven't done so much recently, but I used to troll the Reddit forums and see kind of the kinds of questions people were asking. And there were a lot of new DMs that went there, and it was a really good place to go kind of see what people were asking about, what kind of troubles they were having. And there are lots of new DMs that were there. Yeah. And a lot of times you'd hear about how they they had expansive campaigns that they wanted to run, really big, detailed campaigns that they've, poured over notebooks and notebooks and notebooks full of material. Yeah. And a bunch of house rules, like things they read that they didn't like, and they're going to modify it. Oof. And my instinct, I don't know, so I don't know if my opinion, again, I've been playing so long, it's hard for me to drop into the shoes of a new DM, really. But yeah, I wouldn't think either of those are really great ideas, right? Like, I think, like, above all, like get some friends together that want to play. Yeah. And run a simple adventure, run it at low level, and try to stay to the rules, right? Yeah. And then you can always do the other stuff as you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But like, you're probably, it's unlikely if you're new that you have any idea about how the game rules were made, or what kind of balance they have, or what kind of change, what kind of effects the changes you're going to make have. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't, a lot of people have come up with crazy new classes, or my player wants to play of this weird thing, and I'm going to go ahead and allow it. And then it's like, oh my God, this is such a disaster. Yeah. And a lot of the posts that I saw were people who are like, hey, I did this and now my game's a disaster. And you're like, yeah, like, sorry. Yeah. You get a lot of also people like, hey, I'm having all this trouble with my game. By the way, I have 9 players. you know, and right, and you need to like, you're going to want to split that group up, right? Like, I'm sorry it got to that point, but 9 is too many, and 4 or 5 is great, right? And even fewer can work. But too many is too many. More than 6 is really hard to run.
Definitely.
So those are a few kind of boundaries I would place. I think, especially for D&D, if assuming that the players and the DM haven't run it, I really think that the starting adventures are great. I think that both the Lost Mine of Phandelver from the starter set is great, and the Dragon of Icespire Peak from the D&D Essentials kit is also really great. And they both need a little bit of work, so it's worth doing some web research first. They can be deadly at first level, which is really my big problem with them, is both of them are deadly at first level, and I think they can, I think they can steer, it feels to me like they could easily be disappointing. And then you're like, your first game was disappointing and the players are disappointed, and everybody walks away like, I like my character and they're dead. Some people like dead characters. Like they like getting, but I'm not so, I don't know. I'm not a subscriber to the idea that characters should die.
No.
Or die often, right? And my argument is like, if that's true, then how come it doesn't happen at high levels, right? Like, it takes a lot to kill a high level character, but not nearly as much to kill a first level character. Why is it so lethal at first and not higher level? So that's probably one. Like, I think sticking to starter adventures is something I recommend. Keeping it simple is something I recommend. The depth and the detail of your adventure does not have to be really deep, right? Like, keep it, hey, goblins have grabbed up some stuff and they, the town folk have hired you to go get it back. Like, stick to a really simple adventure, because the players are into their characters. They're not really into your story. Like, the story is the vehicle for the characters to do awesome stuff. So, keeping the story relatively straightforward and simple. It's going to get complicated when you run it, and you don't have to worry about it being too simple. Too short is one thing. You want to have enough to do. But plot wise, you don't need a bunch of twists, and it turns out that the baker's actually a assassin for the Zhentarim. You don't need to have like all that stuff in there. Because the complications will find their way, especially early on. Like, you can have these like big detailed intricate plots later, but early on it's going to be hard to manage, and you're going to get lost in them because you realize, like, wait a minute, the players didn't bite on any of the hooks that I threw out.
Exactly. That's really good advice. And the funny thing is, when I think back on when I started to run games, that was in second edition, that there wasn't a lot of examples out there the way you have it now with actual play podcasts and YouTube
everything.
series. And now you see all these very epic spanning campaigns with lots of details and lots of storylines and twists and plots. And I think a lot of people get the idea that that's what it should be done like. Whereas when I started, they just, of course, I'm sure the book said something about running campaigns, but I never read that. So we just came together and we said, all right, let's have an adventure. Let's go into a dungeon. And sometimes there was some story and that made it more, interesting sometimes. But in the beginning, it was mostly about let's map out this dungeon. Let's kill whatever's in there and find out what cool treasure they dropped. And that was also fun.
I think it could probably, I've thought a fair bit about and read about and had some thoughts and comments on like the Mercer effect, right? As they call it. This idea that like, Matt Mercer and the Critical Role series has created a benchmark for D&D games that people are used to because they watch it all the time and they expect their own home games are going to be like that, and they're nothing like that, and then they're disappointed. And I actually did some polls on that to say like, how disappointed are people really? And it was like, they're not nearly as disappointed as you'd think.
No.
They're happy to play.
Exactly.
Generally. There's I think it was like 20% said I'm disappointed with my game because it's not as cool as like Critical Role is. Right? But DMs were much harder on themselves than the players were. Was a big piece of the survey. I think like half of DMs felt like they were not doing as well as they could because of things like Critical Role. I'm fudging up the description a little bit. And then it was like only 20% of players feel the same way. So it's like, okay, but it's not zero, right? There is a Mercer effect, but it's not as prominent in players as it is in DMs. And the other part, but there is this idea like, you look at Critical Role now, and if you like jumped in the middle of the series and you see all these incredibly intricate connections between the characters and the story and everything that's going on, and you're like, wow. And it's like, oh, it didn't really start that way. Like if you look at like the first couple of episodes,
Uh-huh.
they had some pretty detailed character stuff going on. Like
Yeah.
he obviously spent a good deal of time working with the players on their characters
Yeah.
before the game began. But it was still like, well, we got together in a town and we chased a giant frog, you know, and so it was pretty straightforward, you know, pretty straightforward stuff. But yeah, it's easy to look at that and think like my game needs to be super detailed and super intricate.
Yeah.
The one thing that I think the show does focus on, which I think more DMs could focus on, is tying it around the players and the player characters. That the characters drive the story, and the backgrounds of the characters matter a lot. And that's why step one, not to keep pimping the book, but you brought it up. So step one of the 8 steps in return is review the characters.
Yeah.
What are their backgrounds? What are their interests? What are they doing now? Who are they? What do they, you know, what do they want?
Yeah.
And, you know, even if you don't use it all right away, you just keep it in your head.
Yeah.
And then things will come out. And it's like, oh, you know, so who's one of the characters in my O'Brien game was like one of the original Warforged, right? She was a you know, human that was actually modified by Warforged technology.
Ooh.
And so she's really dark and grim.
Yeah. Like
and I realized like, okay, that's really cool. Like she doesn't know how she was built, and she's got this missing day in her life that she doesn't know what happened there, and she has these flashbacks of her creation and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then one point I'm like, ooh, what if this main bad guy that I've got is actually her Warforged brother, that they were built together.
Oh,
and he went off in one direction, she went off in another, and he knew about her, but she doesn't know about him. Yeah. And then they can face him and he can take off his skull mask and looks like her. And he's like, wait a minute, you know, and it happened. It was cool. Right.
Oh, awesome.
So so that's one where like just having the characters in your head gives you an opportunity to say, ooh, I'm going to make, you know, one of my characters was a bodyguard for a noblewoman a long time ago. I'm going to have her be this new character that comes out later on. Right? Yeah. So I think it's valuable to kind of recognize that from the shows.
Yeah.
Without hopefully getting too overwhelmed by like, oh man, I'm not nearly as good as Matt Mercer is. I can't play D&D.
Yeah.
I think that's what people kind of worry about.
And the thing is, like, I years ago, I ran another quite long D&D campaign, and there was some sort of story that I had in mind, or just a major kind of plot line, and everybody made characters, and I tried to tie them into the world by giving them one particular special kind of homebrewed thingy that they had, like an ability that would grow as they would level.
Yeah.
And then they found this strange prophecy, and they started to try and interpret it, and they tried to. It was about their characters, which was, you know, kind of obvious, I guess, but they weren't sure who was who in the prophecy, and because they were starting to think about it, they started to act like it. And for some reason that stuck with them so much that when towards the end of the campaign, those characters, the relationships they had and all the stuff that they did, it had this kind of Critical Role-esque feeling to it, even though Critical Role wasn't around then. But and you know, very little of that was my work, I think. So I think also for people who are thinking about
the players bring it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
That's kind of what I wanted to say, is that as a beginning game master, or if you're thinking about starting, you know, that you'd be amazed, like you throw something out there, what the players will do with it, and come back with all this creativity. I mean, they have 4 or 5 brains where you have 1. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think something that gets that's underappreciated. It's a little bit of controversy. Is like, you know, having the right players at the table matters a lot too, right? And like, not everybody is going to be the same style that you've got. And I'm lucky enough that I've found sort of the way to describe the games that I run that tends to not bring the kinds of players that I wouldn't be running a fun game for, right? And we got a little bit diplomatic there, right? It's not that they're bad or that I don't run that kind of game, but like I'm not an antagonist DM. No. I'm not a tactical DM. You know, no. I don't tend to focus on the depth of combat. And I run a lot of theater of the mind. And when you tell people like I run a lot of theater of the mind combat, I run a story focused game that focuses on theater of the mind combat. Immediately there's a whole group of people like, that's not my game. Like you know, use Roll20, I'm out, right? And you're like, good, you know.
I want a grid.
Right. And you're like, okay, good luck. And it's like, sometimes I will bring out a grid, right? And big battles, I do that stuff, but generally I don't. And it meant, it helped me to kind of figure out how to segment players, to bring the kind of players to the games that I run, you know, that enjoy the same kind of style of gameplay that I enjoy, because there's a lot of them. There's a lot of different ways to play D&D. A lot of ways to focus on it. And boy, as a player, like I on the other side, when I have like really combat heavy DMs, tactical war gaming combat heavy DMs who believe that every battle should be a challenge, boy, I get frustrated fast, and it's like, I just want to enjoy my character and have fun. And I don't want to like have to worry about every 5 foot square, oh man, I took a diagonal instead of a straight and now I'm screwed, So
I try
I think that's something that new DMs should think about too, is thinking about the kinds of players you want to have and figuring out ways to like bring the right ones in and have the right, have the wrong ones isn't exactly right, but have the ones that aren't fitting your style, like they can find a different kind of game, and that's tricky. I think a key to do that is run lots of one shots, right? Like bring people in and say, hey, I'm running a game this weekend. I'd love to, and then the next time you have a different group, and you have a different group after that, until eventually you find a group and they're like, hey, you guys seem to be having fun. Would you like to continue this campaign in this other avenue? And then it's a way of doing it, rejecting people. You don't want to be like, you're out, you're in, you're cool, you're out.
Exactly, because that's also a bit rough.
I've never had to kick anybody out of a group. I've been able to change up groups over time, but I've never had a situation where I've had to say like, it's just not working out. So I'm lucky in that regard. I know many.
Definitely. I've only had that happen once, and it's difficult, especially because it was in a group of people that I've known since secondary school. So people they go way back, and with one of them it just didn't work out. And it's not like that was a bad person or they anything like that. It's just game wise we were on such like completely different wavelengths, and that caused such problems, like real like heated discussions at the table, and people storming off angrily, and that's rough. Sorry,
are we on like question 2?
Pretty much. But that's fine. So and a lot of what you do is to help people run their games, right? To help dungeon masters or game masters. So, and what made you start your website, this Slyflourish? And also before you answer that one, what is Slyflourish? I mean, I know roughly what it means in English, even though I'm not a native speaker, but
sure.
Where does that come from?
Slyflourish came from I wish, again, like that's sort of like the origin of Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. The story is not nearly as interesting. I hope. I was looking for a domain URL, and in the 4th edition of D&D, Rogues had a power called Slyflourish.
Okay.
And so I said that, I had a bunch of different powers that are a bunch of different sort of D&D things, and that one nobody had taken. I'm like, okay, there it is. And like, I don't know if I would have, like, if I thought like, oh man, 11 years from now, I'm still going to be adding that to the top of every book I'm writing. I don't know if I would have picked the same thing, but it works. And so far, Wizards of the Coast has not added it back into their books for one reason, or I don't know why, but funny enough, they seem to have a lot of rogue powers that are not called Slyflourish.
Yeah, interesting.
So that's probably fine. And so that's where the name came from. And it started when I wrote. So Wizards of the Coast used to partner up with a convention called Winter Fantasy. Winter Fantasy is still going on. It goes on every year. It just happened in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It was the last convention I went to before COVID. It happened in February. Right before COVID hit, and then that was the last convention we did this year. The last physical convention. And it used to be in Washington D.C., where I live. And I went there when they were doing I went there a couple of years, and then they were having their initial preview of 4th edition of D&D. And I went there. This is kind of in the early, the web was around for a while. This was back in 2000, God, I don't remember, 7 or 8 or something like that.
Right.
And I went there, and I said, I'm going to live blog this thing, right? Like there wasn't social media. It wasn't Twitter or anything like that at the time, but there was like Tumblr, if you remember Tumblr. Tumblr was like a kind of a blog, really fast, easy to use blog platform. I think it's gone away since now, or it got bought by Yahoo and then got destroyed or whatever. But I created a like 4th edition preview Tumblr blog where I like took pictures of the character sheets, and I was trying to get enough material that we could actually try it at home. And they were sort of putting out, and I don't think they were particularly happy with me taking pictures of all of their character sheets, but they'd given it to us, right? So it's like, well, I have all this material, and it wasn't like the whole player's handbook or anything like that. No. Yeah, and I got to meet Rob Hainso there. Rob Hainso was one of the lead designers of 4th edition, and he then became one of the 2 lead designers for 13th Age.
Yeah.
And he and I have kept in touch, and yeah. So I talked to him about it, and it was very funny, these conversations I had with him, where I was like, are you going to? It wasn't when they announced it. It was the first convention after the Gen Con announcement, where they actually said, now you're going to be able to try it out. And it was a few months before its release. So I blogged all this stuff and kind of talked about what it was like and gave my experience. And I think it's still out there. I think I archived it because I thought it was so interesting, like what I said about it back then.
Yeah.
And then and that was really popular. A lot of people really liked it. A lot of people wrote emails of, wow, that's really, we got this whole preview of this thing. It was the first site that really talked about it.
Yeah.
And it made the rounds on all the popular RPG forums. And I was like, I could probably keep up with something like this. So then when 4th edition came out, I had actually been running a blog for many years for a computer RPG called EverQuest that I played for a long, long time. Met my wife there and played that a ton. But I was kind of getting bored with EverQuest, and I was getting back into D&D. And I was like, well, why don't I just switch I was already used to writing weekly articles. I was already had sort of my mindset of writing 1,000 words, for an article. And so it was easy to kind of transfer that over to D&D and start writing about D&D.
Yeah.
And then I said, like, well, what focus should I take? And, it was like, I could just write about D&D.
Yeah.
But I could also now, I knew that, like, I'd seen advice from other prominent bloggers who was like, the more narrow you can make it and still have people interested, the better it will be. And I said, okay, so what if I don't just write about D&D in general, but I write about 4th edition of D&D, because 3rd edition was still around. And what if I talk about it from the perspective of DMs, particularly?
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about DMing 4th edition.
Yeah.
And that worked, right?
Yeah.
And it meant that there were definitely a lot of people who were getting into 4th edition. It kind of either transitioned from 3.5 into 4E, and then were DMing it, and they wanted a lot of advice. And another good thing was 4th edition needed a lot of help. Like, it wasn't a great system out of the gate. And so there was lots of talk about, like, well, how do you prevent your solo monsters from getting their asses kicked? Or how do skill challenges work? Or there's all these aspects that didn't make a lot of sense. Like, how do you, what synergies operate between different monsters that will work really well in a battle? Yeah. And so I wrote lots of articles about this, and I said, I'm going to do one a week, every Monday morning, and I'll just do it indefinitely. And I've been able to keep it up. I think the number of times I've missed an article is very, very infrequent.
Wow.
I have a good system for doing that.
Yeah.
And which is, I always write more articles than I ever publish, and I always have a big backlog. So it's easy for me to find articles to publish.
Yeah.
And and so I kept that up, and then I switched over from 4th to, there was actually a period between, like, the 4th edition D&D Next and 5th edition where I kind of did a lot about 13th Age and stuff like that. Yeah. But then 5th edition is like 5 times more popular than 4th edition was.
Yeah.
Which means a lot more people got into this topic too. And so there's a lot of blogs out there that are really, really great. Alexandrian is fantastic. And What the Monsters Know What They're Doing by Keith Amon is really great. So there's a lot of people that are now into this sort of DM advice space.
Yeah.
And really probably, DM David, who writes a lot about the history of D&D and what it means today.
Yep.
So there's a lot of people that are into it. There was a number of bloggers back then too, that we all kind of became friends. My friend Enrique Bertrand, who runs a website called The Newbie DM, and Teo Sabadia, who runs a website called Alpha Stream. And both of them had written, a third-party material or published material for D&D.
Yeah.
And we've remained friends for a long time. And we still consider ourselves like a bit of the old guard, right? We're all kind of Gen Xers who were like, well, we've been playing D&D forever. And we're not bitter, but it's like we all kind of remember, like, man, the kids these days, right? But I'm always like, I'm learning more from them than they are learning from me. So I never see it as like they should learn what we had to go through. No gatekeeping here, but but it's funny that kind of like hang out with the same people. And so that's how Slyflourish got started.
And I find sorry, one of the things that sets you apart is that you often back up your ideas or what you say with numbers. So you collect a lot of data, right? So how did you come up with that particular idea? Because a lot of people seem to write from their personal experience, or they ask
Right.
around. They know from a few people.
Yeah.
But even in the back of this book here, there's tables of stuff that you found out through surveys.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm my, I never like the term because it just sounds egotistical as hell, but data science is sort of my bag outside of
Ah,
D&D.
okay, yeah,
And it's not something I was into early on. Like I don't have a background in math or anything like that, but
no,
I got into it about 5 years ago for my job, my day job,
hmm,
and spent a lot of time thinking about statistics and polling
yeah,
and surveys and statistical significant rates and all sort of
yeah,
all the kinds of things you get into there. And I know that like there's significant polling problems when you do like a Twitter poll and stuff like that. But again, it's
yeah,
like 1,100 views is generally better than one.
yeah,
And it's not like we're doing cancer drug treatments. We're
no,
figuring out whether or not people like Advantage or not. So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I don't mind that the statistical, that things are biased. But it's an interesting point there too. But yeah, it also, the older I get, the less I think I know what I'm doing.
yeah,
And it helps me it really helps. And I think it's helped both my website and my books and everything else to, get a lot of opinions
yeah,
and look at the opinions. And even if I can do trend analysis on the opinions and group them together and see like how popular is this compared to this other thing? Is this really
yeah,
as much of a problem as we think it is?
mm,
And a lot of things that we think are common to, we think everyone's acting like us.
yeah,
Right. And
yeah,
again, that would mean that everybody started playing D&D when they were 14 years old back in
yeah,
1980, whatever.
yeah,
And, that's not true. Right now,
no,
most
no,
people have only been playing a year. So it helps me to get a view. And sometimes the view is really good and sometimes not. So like,
mm,
I think pretty much anytime I have an article on Slyflourish that I'm starting to write, I'll post a Twitter question. And
yeah,
I'm lucky to have a lot of followers on Twitter. So I usually get a lot of answers.
yeah,
And then I can spend time kind of reading the list and looking at the trends. And
mm,
then sometimes I get really good epiphanies from that and I put it in.
yeah,
Sometimes I don't. Like I posted one recently and I got a lot of replies, but none of them really hit the mark.
hmm,
And so I'm like, I guess I'll go with what I got because
yeah, yeah,
none of these are really hitting what I, they
yeah,
were all sort of the general platitudes when I was looking for
yeah, okay,
specificity.
yeah,
But yeah, that's really helped. One funny thing I've noticed, and I'm sure this is true in all these cases, is that
mm,
the time when people argue with your methodology is
yeah,
the time when they don't agree with the result.
ah, yeah,
And
yeah,
it's very funny to me that like if you agree with me, you never have a problem with my methodology.
yeah,
If you don't agree with me, you're very nitpicky about my
yeah,
methodology. And it's like, why aren't you nitpicky? I did this thing, you agreed with it, you're not arguing there.
yeah,
Right. And that's just human nature, right? It's
yeah,
confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is mathematically proven to apply about a 10% bonus onto anything you're putting
oh,
on, 10% detriment.
yeah,
So you see it, but it's very funny to me. And I love to kind
yeah,
of poke people in the eye and be like,
yeah,
you know, do you agree with my result? And that's why you're arguing with the methodology or,
yeah,
not, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's never great science. But yeah, to me, that idea, and I think it has strengthened
hmm,
my writing in all regards of just trying to expand the view
yeah,
and trying to see like for any given situation, what's the answer. And there are many times it helps calibrate me, right? It helps me
hmm,
recognize that like I have things where I think something's true and then it turns out it's not. Like
yeah,
theater of the mind combat, right? Like I
yeah,
run theater of the mind combat almost exclusively,
hmm,
but I know that I'm in the minority, right?
yeah,
And about 2/3 don't run theater of the mind and the majority run with a grid.
yeah,
And then that other group in the middle run with some kind of map, even if it's not a grid.
yeah, maybe
Uh,
with zones or with
Right. So it
yeah,
means that like, and same thing with published adventures and campaign settings, that actually
hmm,
more players run their own world with their own adventures than they
yeah,
do in a published world with published adventures.
yeah,
And it's not huge, but it's still more than 50%.
yeah,
So that's something like when I'm writing the books, I have to really keep in mind, like
yeah,
a lot of people aren't playing the way I play,
yeah, yeah,
and this stuff still needs to be useful. So.
yeah. That's super interesting. Yeah. Hey, and one thing that I ask every single one of my guests is because people that appear on the show, they in my mind they are RPG heroes. They do really cool stuff for my hobby. So who would be your personal hero when it comes to role playing games?
So yeah, my I gotta add a whole bunch of qualifiers because there's a lot of people I know who are all wonderful
Yeah.
people, but the one that jumps out to me is James Intercasso.
Mm,
So James Intercasso is a freelance RPG designer. He is in about, I don't know, 7 or 8 of the hardcover RPG books for Wizards of the Coast. He's worked with Wizards of the Coast now for a few years.
Yeah.
Started with Dragon Heist, but I think since Dragon Heist onwards,
Mm-hmm.
I think he's been credited in just about every one of them.
Mm.
I think there's 1 or 2 he hasn't been in.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's an excellent designer. He's written some really wonderful adventures. He ran my favorite game that I've ever played in, which was called Invasion of the Planet of Tarrasques, in which we played a 20th level one shot where we had to fight. At one point, we faced 100 Tarrasques. Luckily for us, we only had to fight 2 or 3 of them at once.
Oh my God.
And yeah, and it was just tremendous. And I loved my character, and you know, he runs a wonderful game. And so he's a wonderful designer. He's also a super, super nice guy.
Yeah.
And, you know, he doesn't have a big ego, and he's not, you know, he's you know, he's nice. Everybody I've ever talked to that's ever talked to him loves him. Yeah. Right. He's just and so he and I and another friend of ours, Scott Gray, are working on a book right now. We had the Kickstarter earlier this year for a book called Fantastic Layers. Yeah. And so James and Scott and I are working on this, and it's just been an absolute delight to work with James. He's just, his output is incredible. Like he can just, you know, he writes a ton of words, and they're good, you know, not a ton of bad words. And he really knows what he's talking about. And like on the feedback he's giving me on the stuff I'm writing for the book is just you know, he clearly has his head in the right spot. Yeah. So yeah, I think he's a real boon to this whole industry. I think he's a fantastic guy. And I've known him personally for a long time. He got started in podcasting too. You know, my funny James Intercasso story is that I first met him because he emailed me because of the podcast I was on saying, "Hey, I'd like to do this podcasting thing." And I was like, "Don't do it, man. Like that's, you know, it costs too much. It takes too much time. You know, go write a blog. It's far easier. Yeah. No editing. Yeah. You know, all the stuff you know about, right?" Yeah. And luckily he didn't listen to me, and he ended up running a bunch of podcasts for the Tome Show Network. And then made his own podcast network called the Don't Split the Podcast Network. And I was like, man, I'm glad you didn't listen to me, because like there's like 500 awesome James Intercasso podcast shows out there that wouldn't have happened if he listened to my dumbass advice. So, you know, that was also proof that, like, you know, advice is BS, and sharing experiences is really important. Yeah. But, you know, sage-like advice is not. And I try to be careful about that when I'm writing stuff like Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. I think right in the beginning, I'm like, dude, you know, whoever you are reading this isn't the Bible, right? No, like, take what works, throw away what doesn't. Exactly. You know? Excellent. So, so James is, but there's so many, like there's so many others I could mention of people that I've worked with that I love, and people who I really respect. But he's probably the one that leaps out of me. Yeah, sounds like a proper RPG hero to me. Yeah. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you very much for your time. This was a great interview. Yeah, it's been a great joy. A lot of fun. Yeah, thanks. Well, another RPG hero and another fine interview indeed. And I'm not saying that to give myself praise, but my guest, obviously. He had a lot to say and a lot of really interesting things also. My main takeaways when it comes to the topic of this episode would be that one of the crucial things you can do to reduce the time that it takes to prepare your sessions is a simple realization, which is a lot of details that you come up with, or that you could come up with conceivably, don't matter unless the player characters interact with them. And I found that a very interesting comment, and something that really gave me something to think about, because, you know, I like to think in a lot of detail, and I like to imagine a lot of stuff that's going on in the game world, and I think that's good to a certain extent. But if you're in a rush, then mostly just prepare what they will most likely interact with. And that will really save some time. The other thing that I really liked is this idea of writing down 10 secrets, could be anything, that the player characters can discover during the session. You won't use all of them, so keep it short and leave the details up to what happens in the session, and also leave how and where they find them up to what happens in the session. That way you always have something interesting that can happen and that can move the story forward, which I think is a brilliant idea. And especially if you're starting out as a new game master, well, the advice is keep it small and keep it simple, because your players will most likely appreciate what you're doing
regardless of whether or not it's super complicated and convoluted, etc. And the thing is, even if you're an experienced game master, if you just don't have time, keep it small and simple. Keep the locations to a minimum, and keep what happens there pretty simple for yourself to run, and you'll still have a great time if you have nice players. And of course, then the last thing, which kind of goes for this podcast and also for you as a listener, which is any advice you get or give is great, but only you can decide if it's for you. And that goes for all the stuff I've been saying in this episode as well. I'm looking at the recording software, and it's telling me this episode will be 1.5 hours. So 1.5 hours of advice, mostly, but only you can decide which bits of it are for you, which bits you want to use. Well, that's it for episode 19, one of the longest ones yet. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed recording, and if you did, please consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes. It really helps to get the podcast get heard. Want to keep up with the latest news about my podcast? Well, hop on over to Twitter at RPGHeroes1. Check out the full show notes with all the links, etc. at rpgheroes.buzzsprout.com. Want to support the show and join other supporters on my Discord channel? Well, I would be honored if you check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/rpgheroes. You can also buy RPG products with my affiliate code. Check the show notes on how to do that. 2 weeks from now, I'll be talking to Andreas Lundström from the Sweden Rolls podcast about Swedish RPGs and teaching new players how to play your game. Until next time, stay heroic.